What a great time to have this presentation on choosing the Tao. Welcome, everyone. Susan, why don't you go ahead and do your mute thing, and then what are you going to do? Are you going to unmute
We're
Hugh?
gonna all mute, and
Yeah.
then you're going to probably have to unmute yourself to
I've
begin.
Okay.
already done it. Everybody's already muted. We're ready to go.
Oh, you did it? Okay.
Yep.
Let's hit it. All right. Thanks, Kurt. Okay. Well, welcome all, and today we are going to hear a very special presentation on choosing the Tao. This is part of what we're calling the Aquarian Almanac series. And we're doing these every Saturday at 4 p.m. California time. The rest of you guys can figure it all out. 7 p.m. New York time, etc. And I think it's midnight over in Europe right now until the time changes, I think tomorrow over there. Let me get Shoba in here. We don't want to, speaking of different places, she's coming in from Tampa. There she is. And so this is part of the Aquarian Almanac series. And the Aquarian Almanac celebrates the different themes and the different religious festivals all throughout the year. And it's amazing how many occasions, festivals, special days there are. And it really is a way to tune into humanity, really, because all these special religions and traditions and so forth, they just mean so much to so many millions and billions of people. And just like if you've ever noticed reading in the notes on the Bhagavad Gita, where a judge is ostensibly talking about the Bhagavad Gita, right? So you could say that he's celebrating a theme like as in Hinduism, but he's delivering theosophy in the process. And just so we can do the same thing with the Aquarian Almanac series. It's an interesting, exciting, very fresh way to deliver theosophy. And I would like to, there's another theme about the Aquarian Almanac. I would say that it has to do with continuity of consciousness, because there are all these quotes throughout the week that are taken from different literary sources, and they all emphasize from a different angle aspects of the theme for that given week. And there is a Janus effect that Kurt has picked up on of looking forward and looking backwards. So you notice that all of the announcements that he sends out, they all refer to looking backwards and looking forwards. And last week we heard a wonderful presentation from Kurt Fulkent on William Quan Judge. Today it's choosing the Tao, and next week it's the risen Christ. So that'll be kind of tapping into Christianity and the incredible depth of feeling and meaning that goes with the idea of the resurrection, etc. I would like to introduce our speaker, Elton Hall. He has been a theosophist since, I think, 1967, Elton? Something like that?
Yes.
I figured you would have come in the summer of love. He came in, he met prominent people in Santa Barbara, such as Raghavan Iyer and so forth, and has never left Theosophy since then. He has taught philosophy and religious studies in various colleges and universities throughout the United States. I think that his writing is second to none. He's one of the most beautiful and eloquent writers that I think that I've probably ever read in my life. He has written, I think, upwards of 150 articles about great theosophists. You could call them theosophists unaware. He's probably written an article on Lao Tzu, I'm sure he has. Apollonius of Tyana, Jakob Böhm, you name it, he's written about a person like this in the Journal of Hermes during the 70s and the 80s. And so I regard Elton as a lifelong friend and certainly a teacher of mine. So without further ado, I will turn you over to Elton Hall. And he's probably one of the few people that I can even think of that would be able to speak on a subject that is so subtle as choosing the Tao. Elton?
Well, it seemed, since there are old timers here and newcomers, it seemed like a good thing to do would be to be kind of very basic with some fundamental ideas. And those of you who are old timers will pick up on little insinuations here and there and can figure out a rather more complex and rich meaning than I'm going to actually give. I'm going to share the screen and we're going to see if this works. Oh, I have to do one more thing. Let's close. Yep, there we are. Nope, doesn't want to do it that way. We're going to do it a different way. There we go. Can you all see that?
I'm not seeing anything.
Oh. So what didn't I do right? Well,
There you go.
now can,
Yes.
there we go. Okay. Jonathan, is there a way to do this where all the little pictures on the side are gone, or does nobody see those?
Go to play
Play.
slideshow
Oh, slideshow, okay.
from beginning.
From beginning. Ah,
There you go.
brilliant. Thanks to Jonathan and Suzanne, this is, you have a little slideshow anyway. The most famous work in Taoism is the Tao Te Ching, and you'll see older editions you'll see spelled like you have it at the top on the left, and newer editions on the right, which is a little closer to the pronunciation. But since Chinese is a language that uses tone a great deal in a way that English does not, I can't pronounce the Chinese, but Tao Te Ching is about as close as we're going to get. Lao Tzu's text, the Tao Te Ching, 81 verses, is famous. It's the earliest Taoist text. At least most of it goes back to about 500 BC, but it begins this way in most renderings that we have through history. And you'll notice there's an odd word in there. The Tao that can be Tao is not the eternal Tao. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal name. Tao is both named and nameless. As nameless, it is the origin of all things. As named, it is the mother of all things. Well, Tao is one of those rich words that can mean way, it can mean path. Sometimes it means the absolute. It can mean nature. And it can even mean that which is conceived. When it's verb form, like the Tao that can be Taoed, it can mean walked, trod, spoken, or thought. For those of you who have a background in Western thought, it can be as rich in meaning as a word like logos in Greek is. So the whole of the Tao Te Ching is really bound up in this wonderful mystic verse. And so we're going to unpack it just a little bit. First, I want to just draw your attention to something that's called symmetry. If you rotate that square 90 degrees, 1/4 of a turn, you can't tell anything has changed. I'll rotate it. Did you see anything change? No. That's called 90-degree symmetry in geometry. A rectangle will have 180-degree symmetry, which means you have to turn it halfway around, upside down if you like, and it'll do the same thing. And as you might guess, a pentagon will have 72-degree symmetry, a hexagon 60 degrees, an octagon 45 degrees, and so on. That's symmetry just at a kind of picture level, geometric level. Perfect symmetry is a circle. You can rotate it any number of degrees, and it's going to look exactly like it is. So the circle becomes part of the symbol for the Tao, but it's not this one. So I'm going to show you the Tao that cannot be named. Oh, I should remind you, mathematical symmetries are ones that in mathematics, things stay the same if you manipulate both sides.
That's why I was wondering.
Both sides of an equation. The most famous one is the very first axiom in Euclid's Elements. If equals are added to equals, the sums are equal. Should also say there's symmetry in physics. That's when equations that characterize physical properties can be manipulated in various ways and the result remain the same, just like they did mathematics. Conservation of mass energy is an example. So if you take a log, it's a certain amount of mass and a certain amount of energy. If you burn it, the mass energy remains the same, but it'll be dispersed as ash, smoke, heat, light, and so on. So what we could say is there's the eternal Tao. And now if you don't see anything there, remember, if we drew a circle, we would be circumscribing it. We would be defining it. So this is like the Tao, right, whose center is everywhere and circumference nowhere. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, because it is utterly uncircumscribed. It is, if you like, Tao without differentiation. Even drawing a circle begins to differentiate it from the background. What would this be? In physics, it would be entropy. Total entropy would be absolute evenness everywhere. In biology, it is homeostasis, which is a constant attempt to balance everything in a living organism. We call it an unstable condition because it's constantly balancing, and we'll come back to that. In metaphysics, we could use a Sanskrit word from theosophy called Rita, cosmic harmony. Right. To see anything, to be aware of it, to make it an object of thought or consciousness, requires differentiation. Anything that manifests requires some kind of contrast. Contrast requires differentiation. Differentiation implies naming. The first and pervasive naming in Taoism is yin and yang. I can't define those words for you because they're the first, yin and yang. I can give you examples. So on the left side is yin, on the right side is yang. Receptive, creative, one example. Moon, sun, another example. Female, male. Dark, light. Constrained, free. Passive, active. None of those define yin or yang, but they're examples of yin-yang pairs. And so what we begin to realize is if you go right back to the beginning of differentiation, you have something indefinable. Though we can see it operating like in yin and yang, you could also apply it to actions, receiving, giving, listening, speaking, resting, exerting, relaxing, being active. But you'll also notice, if you think about it a little bit, what's yin and what's yang may kind of depend on the context. For instance, mother, daughter, yang, yin. But when the daughter is fully grown and the mother's aged, it will be daughter, mother, because the daughter takes care of the mother, and so on. So you also have to look at the context to kind of figure out which is which. This is the famous Yin Yang symbol, but it can't be understood just by seeing it there statically. You have to conceive it in several ways. First, we're using the bright yellow half of the circle is yang, the dark receptive half is yin. Now, in our Western thought, we're likely to see each of these halves pushing into the other. That's a mistake. In Taoism, each is backing up to make room for the other, so that this circle is moving clockwise, and it is ceaselessly moving. However, at the same time, you'll notice the yang circle has a yin seed in it, right in the center, and the yin circle has a yang seed in it. You have to imagine those expanding until that half of the circle has become its opposite. So imagine those expanding, so the two sides are changing places, and it's circling around. As it circles around, what does it reveal? The circle, Tao, that can be named. So the circle doesn't give rise to the perceptible yin and yang. Yin and yang in their motion give rise to the circle. And that's just worth reflecting on a little bit, because you could say the differentiation reveals the Tao that is manifest, that can be named. The Rig Veda, the oldest Hindu text, consists of a number of hymns, over 1,000. And one of those hymns is called the famous Hymn to Creation. And those of you who looked at the Secret Doctrine know that part of that hymn is right in the frontispiece of the Secret Doctrine. And ancient Sanskrit, like ancient Chinese, can be translated in different ways, but this is my favorite for the first line. Neither ought nor not was in the beginning. Neither something nor nothing was in the beginning. And then a little later on, it says, desire first arose in it. And out of that, you get the whole unfolding of the universe. Well, the word desire there is karma. It is the principle of differentiation. Karma can mean desire, it often does, but it can also mean love in many different levels. It can even mean compassion in certain contexts. And that's worth kind of remembering for a while. So we could say that if the law of activity, as we see in the Yin Yang symbol, the manifest Tao, or here, desire, motion, activity, creative activity, we can see that Ritta as harmony is the law of life. It's a reflection on every level, cosmic and human. There's a constant movement toward harmony. How do we know that? Because karma in action disturbs that harmony in order to manifest and differentiate. but everything that's differentiated seeks balance. So you've got homeostasis in the body. You have to disturb perfect harmony to go get a drink of water, to eat, to bathe, to engage in any activity at all. But the body is constantly adjusting for that. You go outside where it's cooler, the body adjusts the body's temperature. You go inside where it's warmer, it readjusts. And so on, right down to every cellular and subcellular level in the body. That sort of activity is going on. Meditation, you could say, is the effort to achieve homeostasis in the mind at every level of consciousness. Perfect balance, stillness, but with awareness. So Rita, cosmic harmony, is a general word. You could say it manifests in all this activity as karma. Karma is the principle of adjustment, bringing everything back into balance. Karma is the effort to achieve harmony so that what goes out in thought, word, and deed will return to its source. There's another aspect to this, which the Buddhists, of course, were very well aware of, and that is what disturbs harmony cannot help but produce suffering. Things are out of balance. T.S. Eliot's famous phrase, the center does not hold. So one can ask a very basic question that was asked in a group a few weeks ago. Why is there a universe at all? Why doesn't the source just remain unmanifest? And the answer seems to be that it's suffering that awakens consciousness, leading through a long evolution to self-consciousness. Suffering here now, don't take it as just being painful. The Dalai Lama translates the word as unsatisfactoriness, and it can be translated as, anything from unhappiness to disturbance to whatever. But we'll call it suffering because the Buddhists, dukkha, often has that meaning. It's that imbalance that seeks to be rebalanced by karma that leads through a long evolution to self-consciousness. And finally, to Descartes' famous quote in the Aquarian Almanac, I think, therefore I am. This is human consciousness that is aware of itself as consciousness. And eventually that consciousness, as it goes through these processes, can awaken to transcendence, by which we mean transcendence of the personal self to a deeper sense of the real self, and even beyond that. So in the Aquarian Almanac, we find a quote from Saint Teresa of Avila. For the most part, all the trials and disturbances come from our not understanding ourselves. If the unmanifest that you just saw, the blank Tao, manifests through yin and yang, and hence all this opposites and disturbances, then ultimately, what is anything in the universe but ultimately that unmanifest Tao? But differentiated and disturbed, so we can say, for the most part, all the trials and disturbances come from our not understanding ourselves. This is why theosophy is called the religion of responsibility. It's not to berate people for everything that they do or everything that happens to them. It's to remind us that we take ourselves in hand, and we're the ones who can create at every level, consciousness in action, a greater degree of harmony, and get closer to that ultimate source. We come to understand, you notice, through reflection. We don't just experience things. We have to think about them, or we don't learn anything. Just experiences don't do anything. But reflecting on them, disharmony, therefore, teaches us self-consciousness, consciously. About 3 months ago, there was a little fire in a wastebasket, and I grabbed the wastebasket to move it to the center of the room so it wouldn't set anything else on fire, forgetting the wastebasket was made of plastic. Yes, Shobi immediately knows what happened. It's all right. It's all healed now. I learned something. I will not grab a plastic wastebasket on fire again, ever, no matter what's happening. Disharmony teaches us to seek harmony. But the more we become harmonious, the less karma we generate, because karma is disturbance of harmony. And so we hear that the sage, who really knows, right, can be actually karmaless, even when acting and doing, but not generating anything that disturbs that harmony. Ethically, then, this means acting without disrupting. Last week, Kurt talked about William Quan Judge. In the Aquarian Almanac, we find a quote from Judge for March 21st, which was, "Cast no one out of your heart." If we are going to think that we have to act increasingly harmoniously, there's no way we could cast another person, in any sense, out of our heart. This is a real challenge. Some of us were probably not really pleased with our immediate previous president on numerous occasions. But Judge says, cast no one out of your heart. Where one wants to have a reaction to things, the old Christian line, hate sin but love the sinner, turns out to be very difficult to put into practice. So in the upcoming Risen Christ week, next week, we find that there's an aphorism on karma there, and it says, "No man but a sage or true seer can judge another's karma." What a person is going through, why they're going through it, why they're reacting the way they do, how they're generating karma, is all beyond our understanding. We can certainly find actions better or worse, but what that person is ultimately up to, we're really asking, what are they as an immortal soul in incarnation? We can't answer that. We can't make a judgment, or we shouldn't be making a judgment. In fact, making a judgment creates to the very disturbance that we call generating karma, which will come back to us. As ye judge, so you shall be judged, is another saying that comes out of the Christian tradition, of course. Philosophically, Lao Tzu says, Tao invariably takes no action, and yet there is nothing left undone. That too is in the Aquarian Almanac. Psychologically, in the Aquarian Almanac, we find Shakespeare saying, "In peace, there is nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility." The suggestion is most of us are probably overly yang and need to learn something about yin. Socially, this means seeking root causes and removing them. Gandhi, in the Aquarian Almanac, has a quote, "When a man works for an ideal, he becomes irresistible." So we're given a principle of how we can engage in effective action without just generating a lot of karma. And of course, physiologically, as well as at other levels, it means treating causes, getting to the root cause, and not just symptoms. There's nothing wrong with alleviating symptoms, but that if you don't remove the root cause, as we well know, the symptoms will invariably return. In action in general, it means acting with detachment. This powerful message in the Bhagavad Gita, which some of you are quite familiar with. But Tsongkhapa, sounding just like Lao Tzu, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, in the Aquarian Almanac says, "One endeavors to proceed without endeavor. That's worth really reflecting on for a bit. How does one endeavor without endeavor? Well, one acts in harmony with what the circumstances allow. That's difficult often to discern, hence it's a practice that we work on for a lifetime, and indeed probably lifetimes. The unmanifest and manifest. This is also in the very first section of the Tao Te Ching. A mind free of thought, merged within itself, beholds the essence of Tao. If we could completely both still the mind and merge it in its real nature, we would get the essence of Tao. A mind filled with thought, identified with its own perceptions, beholds the forms of the world. That is, it beholds what in Chinese is said, the 10,000 things, which means everything that is, the forms of the world. So, a mind free of thought, merged within itself, notice, merged within itself, it is aware, but it's free of thought, beholds what is not manifest. But a mind of thought, of course, beholds what is manifest, we're told. Then he says, Tao and the world seem different, but in truth, they are one and the same. The only difference is what we name them. But remember, naming is an activity. It makes differentiation. We've heard that somewhere. We've heard the Buddhists say that when they say nirvana is samsara. They're not different. That is, nirvana, in total enlightenment, and samsara, the world of illusion, are not different. They are different states of consciousness, levels of consciousness. They are not different places. So you could say, from a theosophical point of view, we are all, whether we know it or not, seeking to return to the source. And now as human beings, we're consciously seeking spiritual homeostasis in thought, word, and deed through meditation, compassionate speech, and through serving others. Thought, word, and deed. Theosophically considered toward the goal, meditation, compassionate speech, serving others. And in the Aquarian Almanac for later on in April, D.K. Mavalankar, a student of HPB's in India, put it in this way. A person who desires to arrive at truth, capital T, must accept it from whatsoever quarter and wheresoever it may be found. And last week, Kurt suggested that Bhagavad Gita is as good a source as any for finding that truth. It's very interesting that Judge published a letter that was sent by one of the Mahatmas to a lodge in India, which basically said, you consider yourself so pure. You only eat certain foods, you abstain from alcohol, you do all these purifying things, and you're getting nowhere until you purify yourself of judging others, caste, right? We don't have castes, but we certainly have class consciousness here, and we have ethnic consciousness, and as Black Lives Matter reminds us, even subconsciously, race consciousness. He says, if you don't get rid of all of those, you haven't really purified yourself at all. You've just cleaned up the external form. Pretty strong language to a group of people who saw themselves as highly dedicated theosophists. Hence, through meditation, compassionate speech, and serving others is more than just doing things. It's how we do them and what our consciousness is when we do them. And Judge advises in the March 6 quote, cast all doubt, all fear, all regrets aside, and freely take of truth what you may contain. What's important about that is that it says, don't wallow in the fact that you're not perfect. None of us are. Remember, no judging. We don't know where we are in relationship to ultimate reality. We only know where we can head. So we shouldn't judge ourselves as well as others. We shouldn't wallow in self-pity because we know we're not perfect. Spending time regretting the past is a waste of time. We should be looking to the future. And we should freely take of truth what you may contain, he says. We shouldn't worry if we don't understand everything. Students have sometimes said, the secret doctrine is so difficult, it's for intellectuals. No, it's not. It's for anybody who can read a sentence and think about it. It didn't say you have to read the whole book in a week, a month, a year, even a lifetime. It's how you think about what you read. And B.P. Wadia once said, you can open it at random. Read a paragraph. There's plenty there to think about. That's what it's there for. We do have to think. We don't have to be some sort of highly sophisticated intellectual. And then we say, looked at in this way, if we start from where we are, meaning we start from now, not the past, this moment, this place, this condition, and we take what we can, the future will afford more opportunities than we can imagine. Now, like the Buddha said, right, don't take someone's word for this. You can test it in your own life, but you have to test it. If one wanted to be a nuclear physicist, say, and work at CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, one would spend years studying mathematics I can't even pretend to understand, as well as physical properties at a level that I can't really picture, quarks, even something so big as a proton or a neutron, or an atom, which is 99% empty space and more. It takes years to become that. If one wants to become a doctor, it takes years to learn anatomy, physiology, all the different kinds of treatments that are available, all the different ways to identify symptoms and know what they're getting at, all the ways to test for illness. Is it surprising that if we want to become more enlightened beings, just more fully human beings, more compassionate, more generous, more accepting, drawing a larger circle, is it surprising that it might take years and years of work? Why we would think that some sort of spiritual growth would take less effort than learning a really sophisticated job is one of those odd things that we think about. And it would be a mistake to say, well, I don't have what it takes. Well, let's try for 20 years and see. You may not have a knack for something, but how do you know if you don't try? There is no human being that cannot do it in the sense of make real progress, development, and really upgrade the condition of humanity as a whole through those efforts. So in seeking the source, you could say we seek to become karmaless, non-disturbing, by transcending our limited conceptions of the self, and by returning to the Tao, the source, perfect harmony, and beyond. Well, several weeks ago you had presentation, Return to Shiva. This is the Return to Shiva. So I'm going to end by recalling a passage in The Voice of the Silence, which says that we cannot tread the path to full conscious awareness. We cannot tread the path to the source without becoming that path itself. And we could say that path is the Tao. But enough. Did I get rid of the screen for you?
Yes, thank you so much. That was beautiful and lovely.
Thank you, Elton.
All right, here we are.
Thank you very much, Elton. Would you agree to take some questions over the next 20 minutes or so?
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions on this lovely presentation?
I see Judy's hands up.
Hi, Judy.
Judy, we can't hear you. I'm sorry.
You'll have to unmute yourself.
She's unmuted. We just can't hear her.
Oh. Well, she could.
Try removing your headphones. Maybe that'll help.
No.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, I'm pressing it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, the secret doctrine says the eternal parent wrapped in her ever invisible robes had slumbered once again for 7 eternities. Now it strikes me then, and I've heard this from Wilbur Friedel, who was something of an expert at UC Santa Barbara years ago, that the Tao is feminine.
I'm sorry, the Tao is what?
Feminine. I mean, the Tao is like the womb of the universe. But without the seed, she can't reproduce. And it just occurred to me, never before, when I saw the Yin Yang symbol you projected, that the two parts of the yin and the yang look kind of like fetuses to me. and it's like, progeny recapitulate on. It's usually said the other way around, but that we, as the microcosm of the macrocosm, seem to reproduce as the Tao once produced, as the Rig Veda 10:29 says, desire first arose in it. So I think that was the yang entering the yin, and they're both essential for existence of consciousness. So maybe the universe exists, so we ask about it. So what do you think about that?
Wow, very interesting. I don't think I would call the Tao feminine, because I think it's beyond all characterization, because it's beyond yin and yang. As it manifests, it has to manifest both as masculine and feminine. And then you get, as those, when the slumber is over that you referred to in the secret doctrine, then you get this slow unfolding, which is a very high transcendental doctrine, which HPB says is almost inconceivable. So I'm not going to say anything about it, but yes, I think that's a very interesting idea about the yin and yang, because it makes them living forces, and that's important, because what unfolds is not just stuff. That's one kind of differentiation. What unfolds is motion, which we might call vibration, or even at certain levels frequency, like in physics and so on, which gives rise itself to consciousness. So we have all of that, but Tao ultimately is, of course, in duration, timeless. But yeah, very interesting idea. Thank you, Judy.
If no one else has a question, I have a question, Elton.
Sure.
In the very beginning of the presentation, you were talking about, well, one of the things you said had to do with that the yin and the yang doesn't come from the circle comes from that dynamic interplay. Could you, and also you spoke about in the very, very beginning, there's the idea of the verb, that the Tao, you know, where there's a verb aspect in there. I was
The
wondering if
Tao
you,
that can be Taoed, yes.
thank you. I was wondering if you could talk about that kind of, well, anyway, I think that you could clarify some of that. And also the fact of our theme is called choosing the Tao.
Yes.
So that's a verb because it has the
Yes.
ing. So I was wondering if you could try and make something out of all that.
When I said that it's the yin and yang in their activity, their ceaseless motion and transformation that shows the Tao, what I mean is it reveals the Tao. That's the Tao that can be named. Of course, it cannot reveal the unmanifest because it's unmanifest, hence the blank slide. Choosing the Tao, from a theosophical point of view, consciousness has to go through the whole of evolution. Mineral, animal, plant, to gain the kind of experience, and all experience will be some kind of activity or response to stimuli, to reach the level where you can have self-consciousness. That's our level. As the Hindu texts say, and Shankaracharya says, it is an incredible privilege to be a human being because most of the points of consciousness in the universe are not there yet. But really interesting, Ernst Heckel, late 1800s, was a rabid, and I mean rabid, defender of Darwin's theory of evolution. Complete atheist, materialist, but an evangelist for evolution theory. But in one of his works, and he also did a great deal of research, one of his works, he says, thinking of the universe as a whole, the possibility that there are conscious beings so far beyond us in consciousness as we are beyond, say, the consciousness of an ant seems both reasonable and quite possible. For a screaming Darwinian atheist, that's pretty big news. But being human, we have something called self-consciousness. We can be aware of our consciousness, which means we can examine our consciousness. We can choose to do things with it. We're not just, to put it in biological language, subject to instincts and chemical changes. We can choose. Choosing the Tao means one chooses to attempt to come to understand and realize the source. Now you think in terms of yin and yang and all that division in the various quotes we read, clearly that is more than an intellectual venture. It's meditation. But meditation is conditioned and affected by thought and action and word. We set the conditions in which we meditate as well as everything else. So Theosophy teaches, unless you're willing to think in terms of everyone, all life, but all other human beings, and to think of acting in those terms rather than for some very narrow, constricted sense of me, you're not going to get very far. That's a big charge. Notice it doesn't say that's what you've got to do treading the path. That's what you've got to do to get to the path. Meaning one has to have a certain level of determination, self-consciousness, and thought things out to make a good, solid beginning. But being self-conscious, that is what the human being has the privilege of doing. And it doesn't matter our education, our circumstances, gender, anything. We have that capacity. That's what it is to be a human being. And so choosing the Tao would be a quite deliberate act, which I suspect over lifetimes many of us have done many times, though we may have forgotten it. But there it is. So choosing the Tao suggests consciousness aiming to move in the direction of Tao, rather than the direction of further differentiation, disruption, and generation of karma. Does that help, Jonathan, at all?
Absolutely. Very good. Thank you.
Eugene has his hand up. I'm terrified.
Yeah, he's on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Elton, for sharing such ideas. You mentioned the word self-consciousness, and it just triggered a series of questions in my mind. Could you perhaps help us understand the difference between the self-consciousness of, as you've alluded to, a typical human being, the self-consciousness of someone that might be human plus sensitively psychic, the self-consciousness of someone that might be self-reflectively spiritual, and the self-consciousness of someone that might be approaching the Tao, yet unable to be lost in the Tao.
Gee, only 4 levels. Not a problem. Well, many of us, I think, find ourselves quite easily aware of ourselves, both consciously and, for want of a better word, unconsciously. Unconsciously, most people have pretty good kinesthetic sensations. That is, they can put their hands behind their back and know where they are. We move our bodies without probably paying attention. I mean, if you had to pay attention to every muscle to move, there would be some problems. And we are aware of ourselves as a personality. But that's what it is, a persona, a mask. But we're aware of that. Some people identify with that. That is what I am. But then some people on reflection say, no, that's not quite right. I can change the roles I play. I can change what I identify with. I even, over a lifetime, change the personality. In fact, sometimes radically, if a traumatic experience occurs, or some amazing opportunity opens up. But we have to be kind of a different person to take advantage of that. It's remarkable how flexible we can be. So that can't be the real self. And then, usually with the help of some kind of teaching and the help of theosophy, certainly, we begin to realize, oh, there's something behind all of these changes, there's something more permanent. That would be like looking at that endlessly moving yin and yang symbol and then beginning to realize it's the circle that matters. And as those yin and yang move, the circle is just the circle. There's something going on here that's very important. What would the circle be like if there were no movement? and then one can become aware of oneself free of or freer of the passage of time, of accumulated memories. One can begin to see oneself as part of a much deeper stream. But how we think of ourselves is the way we're going to be thinking of other people. And if I begin to see a deeper sense of self, I can't help but recognize a deeper sense of self in other people. Eugene mentioned some people are psychically sensitive. Some people are very sensitive. In fact, many people have had this experience. House hunting. House is empty, but it's for sale. Person walks in and they immediately feel this was a happy or an unhappy house. Is somebody who is about as psychic as a paving stone. That experience I have. And say, no, this was a perfect house, absolutely perfect, and too unhappy to buy. It was just going to be too much work transforming that house into a happy house. People can be very sensitive, and they can be sensitive to one another, and we all are to some extent. We're a bit telepathic. You start talking, I understand you. That's more than just hearing words. That's just more than familiarity with the language. I watch you. One of the things I like about Zoom is we can't be together, but I can see you. Well, a number of you are black with a name, but I can see you. Think if you're giving a presentation somewhere, a talk, formal, informal, whatever. Notice how you subtly change it as you watch the faces of the audience. If people begin to look like they're confused, you might get a bit more explanatory. If people look like they're all want to go to sleep or go somewhere else, you might insert a joke. That is, we become aware, right? Psychically sensitive people are sometimes very sensitive to the emotions around them. I've had the privilege of knowing a person who felt pains of people around them, so that somebody standing way behind them banged an elbow into something, and this person immediately went, oh, ow. They could feel those things. That doesn't make one a spiritual master, but it does suggest what? There is a great deal more to consciousness than just rolling thoughts through the head. There already is a great deal more. This is why it is possible for anybody to meditate, to reflect deeply, to consider what we might call abstract ideas, and to think about those who might be way more advanced in spiritual development, like great teachers, Shankaracharya, Krishna in the Gita, the Mahatmas in Theosophy, and even in meditating on them, begin to loosen up consciousness so that it becomes itself more flexible and is less driven by the impulses of the moment or our likes and dislikes and so on. That's all part of choosing the Tao. One doesn't just choose the Tao, one chooses to make an effort to approach the Tao. Of course, the more one is persistent and reflective, Pythagoras recommended at the end of each day, reviewing everything one did to that day to see what one could have done better, what one did well, what one might want to correct, rather like reading a text and correcting the grammar, what one might want to correct in the future as a way for growth and the increase of harmony. I don't know if that gets anywhere near what you were thinking, Eugene. So it is true. I did put everybody to sleep.
Well, you could finish up the last part then. How do we, and I'm thinking about something definitely theosophic when I ask this question. How do we sit on the verge of the Tao without getting consumed by the Tao?
Leave it to Eugene to raise the issue of the highest mystery just about in theosophy. I'm going to say some words. I'm not going to pretend I even understand quite what they mean. And that is, if one can, let's say, rise in consciousness, or if you like, go deeper in consciousness, whatever metaphor works for you, that consciousness, as it becomes more aware of its immortality, what it's really becoming aware of is its unity with all other consciousness in nature. That's how it is immortal. As it gets closer to the Tao, that level of self-awareness becoming increasingly universal in awareness can approach the Tao and not be consumed. So we're told, even in periods when a universe has not unfolded, in the language of contemporary physics, pre-Big Bang, that level of awareness is possible. Now that, I can't pretend to have a clue what that might mean, but that's what we're told. And it's good enough for me till I eventually get close enough to the Tao to find out. Which is kind of why those levels of consciousness, kind of why the Voice of the Silence says, that really both joyous but stern statement. It's referring to the 6 virtues as they're enumerated in Buddhism. Dana, Shila, Kshanti, and so on. Generosity, behaving with integrity, patience, right? And then the stages of concentration and meditation. Before those 6 virtues, it says, to live to benefit mankind is the first step. To practice the 6 glorious virtues is the second. We're talking about getting to the path. That's a pretty high bar, but it's quite applicable, because for anything I'm doing, even thinking, the question is, who and what am I doing this for? And if I can answer that question honestly, I can learn to adjust my behavior in a way that awakens greater compassion in myself, greater love for the whole, greater identification with the whole, hence greater appreciation of both nature and other human beings. Without that, I tend to be stuck in a pretty small person.
Are there any other questions? I had one question.
I would say I not mind being consumed by the Tao as long as it was dark. Because having been in the hospital twice for some periods in the last 2 years, what I couldn't stand were the bright lights every time the nurse would come in. And I think if one was on the level to be consumed in the Tao, it would be a very beautiful experience if we can reach that experience that Lao Tzu speaks about. Can you hear me?
Just barely.
Thank you. Okay, well, it's all right. But I think being consumed by the Tao would be very beautiful,
Mm.
provided one was on that level.
I think there's a reason why Plato ultimately refused to distinguish between the true, the good, and the beautiful. Ultimately, theosophically, we might say there are three hypostases of one unity.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Hawaii, in the palm trees.
You wish. It's actually a really busy office. When Judy said the idea of being consumed by the Tao, it reminded me of the, Sufi idea of like absorption and being consumed by the mystical presence of Allah. I don't know, Elton, could you talk about any connections you intuited between Sufism or Islam and Taoism?
There was a Muslim mystic from Andalusia, Spain, died about 1250 or so AD, named Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi. And he wrote a great deal about not choosing the Tao, but approaching Allah, deity, the ultimately real. One of the names of Allah in the famous 99 names people get out of the Quran is El-Haq, which means the true or the real. And he took it very much that way. He distinguishes two kinds of high mystical experience. One, where one joins Allah, has this high experience, direct experience of deity, but it is one having a direct experience of deity. And then he says, but there's the experience where one is absorbed into and becomes a deity. But as long as you're incarnated, so there is no I, is completely absorbed. But as long as one is an incarnated being, that cannot last. And one falls out of it and recovers the I. The I beholding deity, you can say things metaphorically and allegorically and so on, like absorbed in and, all the language we use. With the other, you can't say a thing. That's kind of like really beholding the Tao that can be named as Tao and not just all the differentiations, and being absorbed in the Tao that is nameless. I would see, a kind of parallelism there.
Well,
and in both of those conditions, those states, whatever they mean, and I can't pretend to distinguish between them, whatever they mean, clearly words fall far short of giving any kind of real description or characterization of them. I'm sorry, Jonathan, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to thank you, Elton, so much. I would say that our time is up, and we could, let me let Perween in. I think we could just as you mentioned, that it's what you're talking about is helping us get started, making a beginning on the path, just so we could go on for hours, I'm sure. And I thank you very, very much, Elton, for helping us to understand this extremely subtle concept, but making it available to us. And I think this is a really good example about how dipping into these spiritual, mystical ideas and traditions is a way of delivering theosophy, as just was done just now. So I thank you very, very much for that, Elton, really. And next week, we will be hearing a presentation on the risen Christ, and Joe Miller will be giving that presentation. And he always has beautiful insights regarding the whole Christian depth of understanding. So thank you all very, very much. And Kurt, isn't there a website that you have created called Eternal Pilgrims, or actually One Pilgrim, Eternal Pilgrim?
It's the YouTube channel that.
It's a YouTube channel. Okay. Could you put it in the chat? Is that possible? Or is that not really that practical? Kurt, are you there?
I can do it right now.
Okay. And then the other thing is,
Yeah, I'm here.
yeah, awesome. Thanks for doing that. So this was hosted by the San Diego United Lodge of Theosophists, and we also have a study of the Bhagavad Gita at 1 p.m. on Fridays, California time. And we also have a study of the Secret Doctrine at 10:30 California time on Sunday mornings. So Kurt, is there a way that people could let us know that they would like to get the Zoom link for either one of those meetings?
All of our, if anybody sends an email to the email right now, it's at theosophysd.com. Aquarian at theosophysd.com. That's the email address that I'm checking to add people to our mailing list.
Could you say it one more time, please?
Let me put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I type slow. Bear with me.
No problem.
Monica, I
There we
forgot
go.
to send it to you, but I will. And
Okay.
there's the email, so you can all have it.
Okay.
Thank you, Elton. That was wonderful. Very,
You're very welcome.
very good.
Well,
Thank you.
wonderful. The Tao be with you.
The Tao, may the Tao be with you.
Yes.
Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you, Elton.
So
Thank you.
wonderful.
Absolutely. Here, here.
Be well and safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Be well too. Be well,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.